You're listening to an interview taken from the Tonic Talk Show and Podcast, heard exclusively on Zoomer Radio. To download or listen to the original episode or other episodes of The Tonic, please visit thetonic.ca.
Joel Thuna is a master herbalist and general manager of Purely Natural. He strives to improve the quality of natural products in the market and passes along his knowledge of herbal remedies through lectures and articles. Welcome back to the show, sir. How are you?
I am happy as always and happy to be here even more.
Excellent. So today, neither of us are personally qualified to talk about this. We haven't lived through it.
No, we have not.
But, you know, our years
vicariously.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to get into that trap. But, you know, through our years in the health and wellness industry, obviously we see what's coming down the pipe. And it's a huge issue for a lot of our listeners. And that is menopause.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start at the very beginning. What is menopause?
I'm really happy to be doing this because this confusion around this is incredibly gargantuan. Almost everyone I spoke to didn't know exactly what it was, and there was a little bit of awkward silence when I brought up the topic, so I'm happy we're covering it. So what menopause actually is, very simple, it's the time after a woman's menstrual cycle stops, essentially when their fertility ends. It's a normal part of aging. It is not a disease or a disorder. I'd like to clarify that. It is not a disease or disorder. It is a natural biological function that will happen, guaranteed.
And should happen.
Definitely. Oh, without question. Clinically, it's considered to start exactly 12 months after the last menstruation. And that is, of course, without a specific medical cause, because if you have some medical causes, i.e. hysterectomy or chemotherapy, it can happen earlier than that, but it's clinically 12 months after the last one.
Okay. So with the notion of menopause comes with the symptomology, which is, I think, what everybody sort of needs to wrap their head around. What are the actual symptoms of menopause as opposed to perimenopause, which we're going to get into, right?
Yep. Well, the symptoms are divided into two classes. There's the physical symptoms and there's the emotional symptoms. And it's not as though one is more important than the other because they go hand in hand and they affect each other. So physically, it's hot flashes, memory issues, fatigue, bladder infections, incontinence, change in libido, and vaginal dryness. For the emotional symptoms, they're sleep disruptions, lower energy levels, irritability, moodiness, painful sex, and depression. And if you look at those lists, they do intertwine with each other.
Of course. Yep.
And that's where some people have serious issues in that they start with one of the emotional symptoms, thank you. One of the emotional symptoms, then they experience one of the physical symptoms, and they feed on each other, and then the emotional gets worse, then it feeds and feeds and feeds and feeds in a never-ending loop, essentially.
Right. So it's a cycle of discomfort that sort of reverberates, right?
Correct.
As one issue arises, others can flow from it.
And as they worsen in people that don't do anything about it and just try and live with it, it's ripe for depression.
Okay. So those symptoms that you discussed, are those symptoms of menopause or the process of going to menopause or perimenopause?
Bit of both.
And we'll dissect that in a few minutes. Okay, but before we get there, why do women go through menopause? Physiologically, like, why do we do that?
Well, when I mentioned that I was doing this to a friend of mine, her initial response was, it's a cruel joke. But there is actually a biological reason behind it. And the biological reason is called the grandmother hypothesis. And to discover this, researchers had to look at the only other species other than humans that go through menopause. And the only species that do it other than humans are specifically toothed whales, those being belugas, narwhals, killer whales, and short-fin pilot whales. And you're probably, listeners, wondering, why the heck do I care? Well, the reason is it was easy to look at those species and see how the whales that have gone through menopause, how they interacted and what their roles were. It's much easier to do it in animal species than it is in humans.
Right.
Because we tend to lie.
So this is a sociological study.
Correct.
As opposed to a biological study.
Correct. And what they found was that older females that have gone through menopause play a vital role in helping to feed, raise, and teach the generations that follow past them, that being children and grandchildren. They found that by doing that, those women are ensuring the survival and the thriving of their offspring. They found that older women are better off if they stop reproducing and focus on helping the children when it comes to the children's survival, because it gives them the best shot at what's called the genetic legacy. If they kept reproducing, the problem would be they'd find that they would spend so much time on the youngest child. Progeny, thank you. That they would be ignoring the other ones, and their survival would be in jeopardy. By stopping reproducing and then being able to focus on all of the progeny, they are giving them a leg up, and a big leg up, both in food and as well in nurturing.
Right. And I would presume that tied into this is the longevity of the animals that go through menopause, right?
Definitely.
Because whales tend to live longer on average than other animals.
Yes.
Not as long, obviously, as humans, although it's a separate issue. But also, my understanding is that whale pods are female-led as well.
Yep.
So from a sociological perspective, if you have the responsibility of leading your group, not having to reproduce would make things easier. You could focus on the actual leadership, which is, I think, what you're saying.
Definitely.
In terms of humans as well. It's a leadership issue for women, because then they're not bogged down with the reproduction into their later years.
Correct. And if you think about it, also look at our population here. How often have you heard where a senior woman is the primary caregiver to multiple members of her family?
Right.
Because she's nurturing, they have the knowledge and the ability to do it.
Okay.
So it's the exact same thing.
Let's talk about perimenopause now.
Yep.
What is it, and what are those symptoms as compared to menopause?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of confusion around where perimenopause is, what it is, versus menopause itself.
Right.
So in the years leading up to menopause, most women will have changes in their monthly cycles. Hot flashes also, unfortunately, and other symptoms that they automatically attribute to, okay, well, maybe I'm going through menopause now. No, it isn't. It's actually perimenopause. These years are called perimenopause, or other people also call them the transitional years. It usually begins somewhere between age 45 and 55 and lasts about 7 years. For some women, it can last as many as 14 years.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, it's long. During the transition, what ends up happening is physiologically, the body's production of estrogen and progesterone, the two hormones made by the ovaries, starts to slowly decrease. Mm-hmm. And the slow decreasing, that's what causes all of the symptoms. They often experience spotty menstrual cycles, sleep disruptions, and as I said earlier, hot flashes. Now, physiologically, bones become less dense, leading to risk of fractures. And on top of that, energy, the way your body uses energy changes. So you can end up all of a sudden being more lethargic, and you can also put on weight rapidly. Now, here's one of the interesting things about it. In the last 1 to 2 years of perimenopause, the rate of hormone decreasing increases dramatically. At this part of it, so just before actual menopause, women can start to endure all the symptoms of menopause as their body reacts to that rapid decrease.
I see. So even though they're still menstruating, they're getting all the symptoms as if they are experiencing menopause, where they no longer have the cycle.
Correct. And the reason that happens is, even though your body is still producing the hormones, it's such a rapid decline and such a dramatic decline that your body's struggling to figure out how to handle it.
Okay. So all women go through it.
Yes.
And now we're going to tell them how they might be able to deal with it naturally.
Okay.
All right. So where do you want to start?
Well, the first thing to say, regrettably, it is going to happen. There is no way to avoid the symptoms. If you are one of those women who has, and you just have a checklist, I'm going to get this, and this, it's going to happen. You're not going to avoid it. What you can best try and do is minimize the duration, the severity, and the frequency of what's going to happen.
Okay. So how would a woman do that?
Well, the biggest one that most women have on the top of their list is hot flashes.
Right.
And the reason it is hot flashes is they're the one that is the most bothersome, and it is the one that most causes a reduction in quality of life.
What is a hot flash?
So, okay. Hot flashes are Essentially what happens is the blood vessels nearest to the skin start to expand. That expansion causes a rapid onset, heating up, reddening, and in some cases sweating to occur. And this could be out of nowhere, all of a sudden, you're feeling great, everything is good. 30 seconds later, you feel like you've just entered a blast furnace. For some women, they last a couple seconds. Other women, they can last 5, 10, 15, even I've seen as high as 25 minutes. They can go from literally 10, 15 degree difference. It's massive how different it can be. And it's remarkably uncomfortable. For some women, it's predictable. For example, I get one every day at 2 o'clock, or I get one half an hour after I do this. For other women, it's completely unpredictable.
So there's no external, predictable catalyst that's going to cause somebody to have hot flashes. It's random, and it's just a function of perimenopause. That's it.
Correct. But there are triggers.
Okay.
And they're not triggers for everyone. Some people, one trigger is, other people it isn't. So people do have to know their own triggers. Common triggers are stress, restrictive, tight clothing, caffeine, alcohol, specific spicy foods, smoke, and that is from cigarettes, vaping, or cigars, heat, and inactivity. And what I mean by those, for example, when I say inactivity is you're more likely to suffer hot flashes, and they're more likely to be more frequent and more severe if you're someone who's fairly lethargic. If you're someone, for example, who goes to spin class regularly or goes to yoga class or goes walking regularly through the neighborhood, they're not going to be as bad and they're not going to be as frequent as they would be. They may still be bad, they may still be frequent, but they won't be as bad as they would be. If you're around cigarette smoke a lot, it's probably going to be a problem.
Okay.
And tight clothing just makes sense.
Yeah.
Being around a hot environment just makes sense.
Right. So don't do hot yoga. If you're going to do the yoga, don't do hot yoga.
Agreed. Spicy food, that's an interesting one. For individual people, the actual spice is going to be different. For example, I know some people who, yes, they're in menopause, yes, they go through hot flashes. They can have things with chili, unbelievably, no problem. Give them something high in ginger, and it sets them off. And I'm sure it's reversed for other people. Stress, that just makes sense because stress, with all of us, stress causes your hormones to go nuts. Like everything else, your body has to find a way to react.
Okay. All right. So now we know what can trigger hot flashes and we know what they are. Other than avoiding the foods that might be triggers for you, and I suppose that's a trial basis, right?
Definitely.
If you note that something is triggering the hot flash, avoid that food. That's easy enough. What else can a woman do if they're experiencing hot flashes?
Well, the first thing you always want to do if you're someone who experiences hot flashes is to stay cool.
Yep.
And staying cool means a lot of different things. One, quite frankly, have fans around. Around you, circulating the air, even if they're on low all the time, just to have a nice cool air going around you. The other one is to have what is referred to as a chill pillow. It's a pillow at night that may have cooling memory foam, water, or other cooling material, even something like a mild ice pack, just to have something there that can keep you cool just in case. Wear light clothing and do it in layers so that, for example, in the winter like this, you can pull off a layer or two and still be okay if need be. The other big thing to do is exercise.
Yep.
And I'm not telling you to go out and pretend you're Lou Ferrigno or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
Just do something regularly that gets the heart rate going, gets the blood circulating. It essentially gives your body some ability to manage heat regulation better. Because your body has to do that when you're exercising.
Okay. So we have time for one more topic, and that is, are there supplements that can help with the hot flashes?
There are. There's 3 ones that are quite common. One is sage. It's a traditional remedy for hot flashes and night sweats. Researchers found that users who took a really strong medicinal sage managed to get a 60% reduction in frequency of hot flashes. EPA, which is one of the omega-3 long-chain fatty acids found in fish oil and in algae oil, found had a significant reduction in hot flash frequency and duration as well.
Yep.
And The last one is black cohosh. Black cohosh, been used for centuries for this. There is, however, one proviso. If you have liver issues, don't go near black cohosh.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. What are we going to discuss next month? Are we going to discuss more menopause issues?
Definitely. There's a lot more to talk about here. I'd love to do it.